It's Erin Ward here. Oh, you can still record a video. It just won't be live. Oh, that's not good. Okay. Hi, everyone. It's Erin Ward from WSI Digital Solutions Group and the Building Brevard Network. And today I am sitting down with Justin Thompson. He is the CEO and principal of To Exalt. And Justin helps leaders, teams, and organizations and empowers them to exalt performance by coaching them to develop and sustain superior strategies, lean systems, and high-performance tactics that enable their long-term success. So we just want to welcome Justin to the show. And Justin, before we kind of get into your overall programming and a little bit about your company, I'd love to hear more about your background and how you got into this.
Yeah, I kind of fell into it by accident, in the sense that I was an engineer. I'm an engineer by education and background, and worked in technical environment, was doing project management, program management, that sort of thing, for a small company. And the vice president of engineering resigned on a whim. Probably wasn't a whim to him, but it was to me.
Right.
and it caught our CEO off guard. And so he came down to my office and he told me that he had good news and bad news. And the bad news was the vice president of engineering just walked out, just left. The good news is that you just got a promotion. So I became the vice president of engineering, just like in a 5-minute span of time. And I went from managing tasks to managing a team of about 20 people.
Yeah.
And those 20 people were responsible for product development and product testing, quality, all of that, and all of those engineering aspects. So I understood the technical side to it, but had never been in a role where I had to lead people.
Sure.
And so I took the typical engineering mindset at first, which is very analytical and very process driven and technical based, and that works to an extent. But when you are managing people, you've got to be more than just that analytical mindset,
right.
More than an engineer. You've got to be a leader, and I didn't know how to do that. So I started researching and read a lot of books, took a few courses online, eventually got a coach and learned how to lead and learned how to mentor and train people. Kind of learned it the hard way, really.
Yeah.
And through that, I got started doing leadership coaching and leadership training in that role, because I knew that the other engineers that were on the team had some potential.
Sure.
To be leaders. They were excellent engineers, and they had potential to be leaders and needed to grow into that themselves.
Yeah.
And so I put together a leadership development program for a select few of those engineers and technicians, and invited them to come meet with me once a week for breakfast before they came to work. And we had an off-campus training program once a week where I gave them reading assignments and homework, and we talked about all of the things that we were learning, and I was trying to learn through with them everything from time management to people skills to, the engineers are really good at the technical, the math and the physics and
right.
the electronics and all of that good stuff,
right.
But not necessarily with the soft skills and being able to relate to people and mentor the younger engineers and that sort of thing. So put together that program, and all of the guys that were in that have eventually gone on to become managers of some sort in different companies that they, I don't work with any of them anymore, but they're all spread out around in different places, and they're in leadership roles now. And so I kind of take pride in that was able to help those guys develop and become better leaders themselves, and keep in touch with most of them. But since then, I've repeated that at multiple other companies and had similar results in every place that I've done it, and decided in 2015 that I wanted to launch on my own and do that full time, helping people who were in leadership roles or wanted to be in leadership roles to get better at the skills that are necessary. They already have some expertise in their field, but developing the expertise to become leaders so that they then multiply by helping others to be better in the same field.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And what's kind of cool is like you were learning to be a leader as you were learning to be a leader, because you're sitting down these people into a group that, like, you know, that might not have been your main task, but just by pulling them off, you were learning that leadership role organically, which is really interesting, because that's, most people kind of just do it textbook wise, or they're just in the position and they use that experience, but you worked alongside with them, which I think is really, really interesting and a cool part of your story. So you know, you work with, from what we talked about, you work with individuals, you work with smaller companies, you work with larger companies. So talk me through kind of what an assessment period looks like more for the small business to larger company size. Like, what do you do to understand what their pain points are and what their goals are from leadership?
Yeah, so there's two different aspects to what I do when I'm doing an assessment. Part of it is the leaders themselves, and part of it is the defined strategy of the organization. And the two go hand in hand. You can't separate the two. And if in assessing that strategy, I look at, and when I say strategy, I'm talking about everything from the basics to do people in the organization know what the core purpose is and what the mission of the company or organization is. And if they don't, then there's a leadership problem, because you're not communicating it. Either you're not communicating it, or it just hasn't been created in the first place, which all too often is the case. So that's part of what I do, is assessing how well does the body of the organization, the people, how well do they know and adapt and live out what the purpose and mission of the organization is. And that's kind of step one to knowing how to coach the senior leaders at the higher end level of leadership, because they're the ones that are setting that vision for the organization. And if they know what the vision is, if I sit down and interview the CEO, for instance, and he knows exactly what the vision is and can articulate it really well, but then I go out on let's say it's a production facility, I go out on the production floor and ask John Doe operating some of the equipment, what's the vision for this company? Where's it headed? What's your mission? What are you doing here? And he can't articulate the same thing, then there's a big gap between the boardroom and the production floor, and that's a gap that you need to close, and that's what leadership is about.
And it shouldn't be subjective, right? That should be kind of a common culture within that company. It should never be, this is John Doe's interpretation of it, this is what the senior VP's interpretation of it, and this is what the CEO's. Like, all of that needs to be consistent.
Be very consistent, cohesive. You might have two people articulating it with different words, but if they're not saying the same thing, if they're articulating different visions, then you've got a problem, because the people doing the work are headed in a different direction than the guy driving the boat.
Absolutely. And so when you make that assessment, or when you do the first part of the assessment, talk about what the second part of the assessment looks like as well.
So the second part of the assessment is more individualistic with the leaders, and looking at them individually, looking at personalities and skill sets and current behaviors, what are they doing as a leader. One of the very common things, and from my background story that I just shared, it's my personal experience too, is people in professional roles, like an engineer, could be an engineer, an accountant, a nurse, anybody has highly developed professional skills and is good at their job, eventually they're going to get promoted, because that's the way the system works. And when they get promoted into a leadership role, a lot of times what happens is they flounder, they don't perform nearly as well as they were performing in their professional role, their single contributor role. And then their managers tend to look at them like, yeah, maybe we were wrong and shouldn't have promoted them. And when I go in and look at it, I want to know, were you wrong? And that person just doesn't have what it takes to lead, which usually isn't the case. More often than not, they weren't trained. They had a lot of training to be an engineer or an accountant or a nurse or a lawyer, but they didn't have any training to be a leader. And those two, the professional skills and those leadership skills, are different. And that person needs to have both. I can't necessarily help them with the professional skills, because I don't know anything about accounting or lawyering. But maybe if they're an engineer, I could help them a little bit,
Yeah.
but I can help them to develop the skills that they need to take those technical skills and use them as a tool in their leadership role to help them lead the people that they're leading. And then if they master those leadership skills, then they become not just, say, an engineer or
Right.
even an engineering manager, but they become a force multiplier because everyone in the organization gets better at what they do because of this person's mentoring and empowering the people that they lead.
So there's a term called natural born leader, but essentially what you're saying is that leadership isn't necessarily always an innate skill. It's something that you can learn, right? It's not something you're naturally born with, but it's something you can be coached through, which is interesting concept.
Absolutely. I mean, we all say so-and-so is a natural born leader. And to me, what that means is that person was naturally gifted with certain skills and abilities. That everyone has certain skills and abilities that they just naturally are born with. And sometimes people are naturally born with the skills. And so the behaviors of a leadership role come very natural to them. But all of those behaviors can be learned by anyone who really wants to apply it and learn it.
That's interesting. That's really interesting because, as an athlete in my 100 years ago, what the one thing that was talked about was like there's always the natural born leader on the court, but it's always funny that there's always a secondary leader on the court that was always kind of the leader by example. Like you always have kind of two different styles of leadership. That's really interesting.
And they're both leaders,
right? In their own ways.
In their own ways. In their own ways. You don't have to be at the top of an organization to be a leader.
Right.
As a matter of fact, the best organizations, everyone in them is a leader.
Right.
And leadership simply means that you're influencing others in a positive way. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're managing them, but influencing them. I think that everyone in an organization really should develop the leadership skills and then apply those leadership skills up and down the organizational chart.
Right, so it's not just from the top down, it's from the bottom up too. Yeah, that's interesting.
We all recognize that the boss is a leader.
Right.
But
because he has to be, right? At the end of the day.
Because he has to be.
Right.
But if the boss has a team of leaders that are leading him and leading each other and leading their customers, then now you've got a really high performance organization that's going to flourish.
Right. That's amazing. That's amazing. It's so cool to hear you talk. So what kind of programming do you put in place like for people's different pain points? I know you kind of talk about how you break it out into like strategy and high performance teams and then developing leaders. So talk us through that.
Yeah, one of the things that the way I like to describe what I do, I call it the LAP methodology, which is learn, apply, and perform.
Okay.
So the services that I offer really fit into one of those three categories. And the learning side of it is part training and part assessing your organization to see, that's kind of what we already talked about, that assessment piece is learning where you are right now.
Sure.
If you're looking at it on a personal level, it's think about a personality assessment. You're going to learn about yourself, not to determine what you can do, but what your strengths and weaknesses are and where you need to develop and learn how to adapt. Same is true with an organization. You're going to assess kind of the personality of the organization and where it is, what its strengths and weaknesses are, and then how it needs to adapt and evolve to become better. That's the learn piece. And then the apply piece, what I do to help organizations, and that is look at that learning component and then develop a program of either workshops or coaching or a combination of the two to help take that knowledge that you've gained and apply it to making yourself or your organization better. And then the perform piece to it is a longer term coaching model where, for instance, if I'm coaching someone to apply what they've learned, it's probably going to be 1 or 2 coaching sessions, maybe a month or 2, at the most a quarter, where we're meeting weekly.
Okay.
And the reason for that is you need, in that aspect, as you're learning to apply what you've learned, you need to meet with a level of frequency that keeps it at the forefront of your mind. Otherwise, the day-to-day stresses that we all have will cause us to forget and then pulling it back up, if we don't meet till a month later, that's going to be difficult. Once you get it applied, then that performance coaching aspect to it would be meeting once a month or even once a quarter sometimes, just to check in, how are things going? Are you making progress? Are you sticking to this? And then helping the individual and the organization to take what they've applied and use it to perform at a higher level to continuously improve over time.
Yeah, and it's not an overnight success story, right? With anything, you have to be able to learn the material, apply it with coaching, have someone there to answer questions that you kind of come across along the way, and then having that kind of ongoing coaching is super important. So when someone goes through that programming, the lab programming, what kind of tangibles or intangibles can people expect from, starting in the beginning to, let's say, the end of a program after 6 to 8 months?
Yeah, these somewhat intangible, but there's some tangible aspects to it. Your time management skills are going to be improved. Your focus is going to be improved. Your ability to prioritize and stay focused on the right priorities is going to be better. Your ability to help mentor others and train others within your organization so that they are also improving is going to improve. So that's the beauty of leadership. Once you develop the leadership skills and you get better at leading, that in turn causes others to get better at leading because you become the coach, and that's the end goal really for any leadership coaching is helping the person that you're coaching to become a coach, because
it's more empowering, right?
It's empowering them and helping them to empower others, because that's the goal of leadership. So that tangible aspect to it is that your ability to handle a particular workload is going to be so much greater because you're not doing it all yourself. That was my biggest mistake when I first became a vice president of engineering. I went from the mindset of, okay, I'm the project manager, I've got to do this, and this, to I'm responsible for project managers, and I'm responsible for engineers, and I'm responsible for everything that they're doing, and oh my goodness, I've got to be involved in all of this. Not really. I've got to be aware of it and proactive within it, but not deeply involved in every project that's going on. I need to release that and delegate that to the right people.
Right.
Make sure I have the right people in the right roles, and then let them do it. And what I learned over time is that when I step back and let the experts do their job, it made my job so much easier, because I didn't have to spend all this time digging into every project. I could trust them to do it, and then just be informed on where things are going. If something's going wrong, come tell me. And if everything's going right, let me know that too. But I didn't have to get into the nitty-gritty details of everything that was going on, and so I could do so much more.
Right.
And that's the beauty of leadership, that you really multiply what you can do.
I think a lot of small businesses, especially smaller business owners like me, because we cradle and hold our business like our child, because we've seen it from infancy, we have a hard time delegating stuff out to people, because it's so personal for us, So do you find that that's a similar case when you work with smaller businesses and CEOs and owners?
And I can relate, because I am a small business owner, so I know what you're going through. I have to remind myself of that same thing all the time. But that's the most common problem with small business owners. The founder of the company builds the company up to a certain level and then becomes the bottleneck, because they're afraid to release stuff and let other people take over in certain aspects. But if they successfully learn how to do that, the potential for growth is beyond their wild expectations. If they don't do that, then they're limited to what they can do themselves.
So talk us through, right now I know you have your Mastering Leadership course live. So talk us through what that program looks like.
So I've got a program there's 6 courses. 2 of them are live right now. A third one will be live in the next week or so. And then they'll be adding, every 2 or 3 weeks, they'll be adding additional courses until all 6 of them are live.
Right, because you don't want people to digest this all at once and then walk away and like be drinking water from a fire hose. You want it to be
exactly.
out.
Each of the courses they're self-paced courses,
sure.
but they're designed to be done over the course of a month. So there's 2 to 3 video segments to watch for each week, and so you get 8 to 12 videos per month, and then there's some of the courses also have some additional materials that go along with them. One of them has a personality survey. One of the ones that's live now has a personality survey. I'm sorry, it's the third one that's about to go live that has the personality survey with it. So there's things like that are embedded in the course. So if you follow the intended plan, it's going to take you about a month to complete the course, and then at the end of that month there's a webinar live conference call set up so that everyone who's participating in the course can call into that, ask questions. There'll be a brief presentation. If no one asks any questions, it'll be a very short call, but hopefully there'll be some discussion and there'll be questions related to the material that was covered. Sure. And so there'll be 6 of those shortly. There's 2 now, almost 3. They can be purchased individually or in a bundle of, they're segregated into 3 2-course bundles. So you can buy any one of those 2-course bundles, or the best value is to get all 6 of them, and then you get it at a much reduced price per course.
So what does each course look like? So just give us some idea of the topics that you discuss, like what are the names of the courses, that kind of stuff. Like what do you go into on each course? And I know you build the foundation and kind of build up, obviously, from the basics to the more kind of experience, but what are those programs look like from topics and things you discuss?
Yeah, so the first bundle of courses that's live now is 2 courses. One is called Leadership Foundations, and Leadership Fundamentals, and the other one is called Leadership Framework.
Okay.
So the fundamentals course kind of looks at the theory of leadership, and how thinking on what leadership really is and how to be better at it has evolved over time, and up to the point where I take what's common leadership theory and then present my interpretation of how to lead. I call it star leadership, but so all the way from going back, 100 years or so, to what they called the great man theory, which was leaders are born, not made.
Right.
And there's the guy who's heir to the throne, and he's the leader. Because he is.
Right.
Whether he's good at it or not is irrelevant.
Right.
It's because he is.
Right.
Up to the more modern situational leadership and servant leadership concepts, and so I kind of draw from both servant leadership and situational leadership models, and package that in what I call star leadership. So that's in that course, and then the leadership framework course is I call it leadership framework because it's kind of building the framework of a structure for your leadership that provides the first half of the course is talking about what I call the pillars of leadership. And those are 7 foundational things that every leader has to have in their life, so to speak, to be a good leader. And then the second half of that course is leadership practices, which are again 7. Why both of them happen to be 7, I don't know, but that's the way it turned out.
Lucky number.
And so there's 7 leadership practices that it's really meant to be a very practical, down to earth, do these things every day with intention and being proactive about them, and your leadership will naturally get better because you're doing these 7 things. And so that's that course. The next course that's about to go live is really learning the core principles of leadership, which start with knowing yourself. And so it begins with a personality assessment and talking through what that means. A lot of people like to use personality assessments to determine whether or not somebody can be a leader. I think that's a bad use of personality
Sure.
assessments, because as an example, just look at the several psychologists have done research and estimated what, going all the way back to George Washington, what
Right.
every president's leadership profile looks like. And they're all different.
Right.
Just about every personality profile you
Right.
can think of is represented by one of the presidents of the United States.
Well, you have to take in a human element to it, right? It's not like
Yeah.
it's a plug and play system. Like there's such a human element because A, you're leading people, and and B, you are a person. So you're going to adapt the style to what fits for you. You know, if
Exactly.
you're more of a quiet contender, then you're not going to be the loud, robust kind of leader that an organization might expect you to be. And maybe sometimes, have you seen that happens where maybe the organization isn't quite a good fit for the style of leadership?
That can happen sometimes.
Okay.
A lot of times what happens is, a lot of times that is true, because
Yeah.
the personalities within the organization, maybe, for instance, if you have an executive team and everybody on that executive team are really, really strong extroverts,
Yeah.
you're gonna have a lot of yelling back and
Oh,
forth,
sure.
and nothing's ever gonna get done.
Sure. Yeah.
But if you have all introverts, then no one's gonna talk with each other, and
Nothing's gonna get done.
But if you have a mix of the two,
Yeah.
then you're probably gonna see the best results.
Yeah.
And so from that aspect, your personality matched to the personality of the other people within the organization is important.
Yeah.
Where I think it gets incorrectly used sometimes. I think using it in that regards is a good thing.
Sure.
Using it where I think it gets incorrectly used is saying, well, this person's got this particular personality, so they can't be a leader.
Right.
Or this person's got this personality, so they're going to be a really good leader. And that's just not necessarily true. Pick a personality style, and if you think that that's the right one for a leader, we could probably find 50 examples of people who have that personality style but are horrible leaders.
Right. Right.
and vice versa.
Right.
Pick one that you think is a bad leadership personality style, and we can probably find 50 that are good leaders.
Right.
The reality is that every situation, from the organizational structure and the personalities that are in that organization to the details of what that organization is doing and how they're proceeding and what the problems that they're facing and all that sort of thing, different personality styles will be good at different things. And sometimes a personality style will be the best fit for this leadership role because of all of the things that are going on
Around
within that company.
Right.
But then those things can change.
Right.
And that personality style may not be the ideal personality style next week or next month or next year or maybe this afternoon.
Right. Yeah.
Depending on how quickly things are
Right.
changing.
Like you. Right.
Yeah.
5 minutes.
Exactly. So what I like to do is to use that personality assessment to help a person understand their own strengths and weaknesses, and then learn how to adapt, because no one's going to be consistently a great leader if they can't adapt.
Right.
But if they learn to adapt and learn, for instance, I'm an introvert, but if I learn to behave like an extrovert when I need to, then I can take advantage of the leadership aspects of being an extrovert. And I think I do that at times. I hope that I do that.
Yeah.
That's how I strive to do that. But if I don't learn to behave like an extrovert, then I'm missing out whenever that extroverted tendency is a necessary part of
Sure.
being a leader. The flip side of that is true as well. If you're a strong extrovert and you don't learn how to behave like an introvert at times, then when you need to be focused on something, you're gonna have a hard time.
Yeah.
It's just the nature of your personality.
Yeah.
So learning what comes natural to you and understanding what comes natural to you, and then learning how to adapt. Sometimes it's adapting yourself, sometimes it's pulling others that have those skills naturally in to be on the team, and
Sure.
you know, where you're strong, they're weak, and where you're weak, they're strong, kind of thing.
Yeah, like complementary opposites almost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, that course begins there. Let's learn who you are and what that means and how that impacts your behavior on a day-to-day basis. And then let's learn how to adapt those strengths and really capitalize on those strengths and fill in those weaknesses wherever needed.
That's awesome. Well, if people want to learn more about you, what can they do? What's the best way to get in contact with you?
The best way to get in contact with me is through my email, which I think you're going to put
I'm
in
going to put
comments.
in the comments. Yeah.
and to get more information on the website as well,
Yeah.
which is just toexalt.com.
Yeah, and we have the leadership, mastering leadership course actually on the Building Brevard Network page. So if you have any questions about that or you're interested in learning more, that's where you can go and access all of that information. I want to thank you, Justin. This was awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome interview. So good to sit down with you. I have the pleasure of seeing Justin every week in my leads group, so it's always cool to pull some family into the interviews, and just really appreciate it. And get in contact with Justin if you're looking for leadership. So thanks so much, guys, for tuning in, and we will see you next week. Thanks so much.